Thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar, How Classroom Management Software Can Improve Your School's Instruction and Technology Programs, hosted by Dyknow. Our webinar today is going to be a mix of video conversation and slides with some helpful content. Before we dive into the webinar, for those of you who aren't familiar with Dyknow, Dyknow is a classroom management software that helps teachers defeat device distractions and keep students on task in digital learning environments. As an edtech partner to thousands of educators, we have the resources to help guide your school's student device program in the right direction, which is why we have decided to team up with educators like Cody today in our monthly webinar series. Your webinar experience today. So here's what to expect. It is being recorded and will be made available to all post-event sometime early next week. I'll be sure to email it out to all of you. Feel free to share it with any teachers or technologists that you work with. Q&A, use the chat bot to submit questions and comments. You can submit a question by exiting the full screen mode and selecting questions on the bottom bar of the webinar screen. We'll try to see how many we can get to at the end of those that are submitted. We are your hosts today. I'm Rachel Green and work as the Demand Generation Manager in the Marketing Department at Dyknow. My goal is to highlight the educator's voice to ensure the right message gets in front of the right audience to inspire and encourage action, helping educators like you make informed decisions on how to optimize student device programs in your classrooms. Today, we have Cody joining us from Cleveland City Schools. Thank you so much for taking the time to be featured in our webinar today, Cody. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. As she said, my name's Cody Raper, and outside of the district, I'm the instructional technology facilitator because that title makes the most sense. Inside of the district, my official title is Blade Facilitator. Blade is our digital learning one-to-one program, and so I help ensure that that goes smoothly and work with teachers on implementation of instructional technology.
Awesome. So the webinar today is going to address each of these points through Cody's experience as an educator at his district, Cleveland City Schools. Our goal is that you'll find this information helpful and can take a piece back to your schools and classrooms. So time to get started. We're going to start with the video portion, and then we are going to move to the slide content. So bear with us as we make this transition. And then perfect, exit, new share, screen. Okay. And that's Cody. You can do this slide here. All righty. I assume everybody can see us. So we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. Cody, first question is, Cleveland City Schools completed your one-to-one 6 through 12 Chromebook rollout this past fall. Can you tell us a little bit about your district and the technology environment?
Yeah, so originally we had carts in every classroom. They were Windows devices. And as we looked toward what we really wanted to do and looked at devices that gave us the best mix of instructional learning in the classroom with balancing the needs of the technology department and maintaining those devices, we ultimately went with Chromebooks. So in grades 6 through 12, every student has a Chromebook and they can take that device home with them. And then in our elementary schools, carts are available so teachers can have that one-to-one experience as well, but they don't take the devices home.
Great. What were the steps that your district went through to create that digital transformation with that one-to-one Chromebook environment and then the cart lab model you mentioned in the lower grades?
Yeah, so originally we had the carts only, and those were in 612, some iPads and things like that here and there, but it's mostly Windows devices. And as we went forward to taking devices home, they were easier to manage, so we went with the Chromebooks. And so the committee got together, looked at a bunch of different devices, ultimately decided on the Chromebooks and the G Suite as our direction we were going. Now, as far as the actual implementation, our district did a really good job developing a strategic plan committee. And so we had a Blade initiative, and we had committees that met to talk about how do we keep students safe? How do we keep devices safe? What do we do about insurance and those different policies? And how do we communicate this to the public and the other stakeholders in our system? And so these different committees met, decided through all these different things, and then ultimately compiled it down to what we know as the Blade project today, which stands for Blended Learning and Digital Enhancement. Now, as we rolled the devices out into our schools, it went to the middle school first. So in grades 6 through 8, we did a mid-year rollout in February of last year. And then this year we rolled out 9 through 12th grade with the laptop starting the school year. As we got those devices into our schools, it freed up the laptop carts, which we then were able to move down to the elementary to fill in any holes that we had there. Ultimately, the plan is to look at some type of Chromebook device there as well, and that's just kind of down the road.
Got it. So you mentioned how you started with the 6th through 8th grade, and then you graduated to the high school, and the elementary is kind of still on that roadmap. Did you find that was an easier implementation process by kind of landing and expanding through those grade levels versus hitting every single grade at once?
Yeah, so in our district, we are fortunate that we only have one middle school and one high school. So we kind of picked a school that was already really heavy in technology use. We're able to roll it out there. One of the biggest hurdles to the original logistics was figuring out how are we going to do deployment? How do we get these devices into students' hands? How do we make sure that we are able to account for all the different devices at the end of the year? So starting small, figuring out that model that worked for us, and it scaled up very well.
That's great to hear. And that isn't uncommon. A lot of our customers who we have do that exact model where they start with a grade or start with a school that uses technology a little more in the district and kind of uses them as a guinea pig beta before they expand it to other grades. So my next question is, I attended your wonderful presentation at TITA back in the fall in Tennessee, and it was on classroom management software and the purpose of it, which we're going to get into some of that content today. But you mentioned some reservations regarding implementing a classroom management software, like maybe, teachers are going to be glued to their screens, or reservations there. So I'm just curious, what made you realize a solution was needed at your school, and eventually which led you to implementing Dyknow for your entire district?
So as the instructional technologist, my job is to work with teachers on implementing the computer technology into their classroom. And one of the big first hurdles to get past is all the distractions of my student's not on task, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, they're sending notes. And I was very adamant that teachers had to learn basic computer classroom management techniques in order to be successful. And so I was very much on the kick of, we're not going to use the software, we need to do it manually. Teachers will have to learn that sending an email or a chat is just like passing a note. How do we handle those things? And we went into the rollout at the middle school with that idea in mind. And a few months in, it became very obvious to me that I had made a misstep. One of the biggest issues with rolling out is getting buy-in from the teachers and making them feel comfortable. And so we quickly realized that classroom management software would play a key role in this. Now, a classroom management software can never ever replace all the good pedagogical and classroom management things you do in a classroom, but it is a really strong supplement that can help teachers feel more comfortable using the technology because they have that scaffold. So especially at the beginning of a rollout, the classroom management software is a nice scaffold for teachers to get them using technology, feeling comfortable with it, and those kinds of things. And now that they have it, I don't think they would ever release it.
That sounds very familiar. A lot of our customers said, we've been one-to-one for 2 years, or we implemented in grades 4th through 5th grade for an entire year, and we never knew this existed. And once they get it, they don't want to lose it. And I love what you said about feeling more comfortable there. And also, it's not meant to replace any learning or the teacher. It is there to support you and guide you so you can leverage the digital learning and the technology in your classroom to the best of its ability to help you educate those kids. So that's a good realization and point made there. So we're going to go ahead and transfer back to the slides. So give us 1 second here. Share, share. Okay. And we're going to get into the content portion of the presentation. You present. All right. And then Cody, I'm going to minimize you. And I'm going to turn off my camera there. Okay. So this leads me to our 4th or 5th question. So in relation to that presentation that you gave at TEC last fall, I was hoping you could cover some of that same content today, which is listed on this slide. So can you walk through with the audience through the information here and explain the purpose of a classroom management software from the 2 perspectives of instruction and technology and how it benefits both of those departments?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and my role, I kind of in between of the instructional staff and the technology staff. And so as I'm implementing this, I'm seeing it from both sides and getting to work with both groups. And so, as she said, I had the opportunity to give a presentation on this at TETC. And so I really wanted to be able to talk about why I thought classroom management software was necessary, especially since I was such a convert. And it really does come down to a few main reasons on each side, whether you're on the technical side or whether you're on the instructional staff side. And so from the instructional staff, the key ideas I thought of were being able to monitor your students, manage your students, and assess your students. And when I say assessment there, I'm talking more about those in-classroom formative assessments, which I'll talk about in a second. So at its basic level, a classroom management software is going to help you to deter and limit off-task behaviors. So it's going to get rid of those students going to YouTube if we don't want them to, or going to play games and those kinds of things. So one of the biggest concerns teachers have is, what if a student is on the computer not doing their assignment? And so this helps us to really be able to see what they are doing and also try to deter those behaviors. It also gives peace of mind to the teacher. Just having it on really makes the teacher feel better because they get that little sense of, okay, yes, I'm in control of my classroom, and that whole control factor moves back to the teacher's hands that they often feel like they're missing because of moving to technology. One of the other things is on-demand filtering. If you're in a classroom that is very dynamic and moving like it probably should be, then there may be multiple websites that you should be visiting. And you have the ability to select what you can and can't do on the fly. As a general practice, we recommend our teachers to block everything and then allow those websites that they need. And we also create a whole plan for our student or for our teachers to use that, hey, here's the common websites that we use at our school. So if you use this plan, it's probably going to be enabled. But if you want to do the opposite as a teacher and you have kids that are jumping on the wrong websites, you could also just block those. Now, that can't ever take the place of those conversations that need to happen with the student, but it can definitely be a quick deterrent to, hey, we're not going here, and just blocking those kinds of things. One of my favorite features of classroom management software, especially specifically Dyknow in this case, is that it allows you to instantly poll your students. One of the biggest impacts technology can make in the classroom is letting the teacher do formative assessments where they can quickly get feedback and act on that data live while the class is going on. And so there's several different options out there. We can do Google Forms, we can do Poll Everywhere, and there's clickers and all these other different things, but they require students to take an active part and go into a specific website. Okay, now that I'm here, I'm going to log in with this code. Now I'm going to answer the question, and that takes valuable time out. But at least our classroom management software that we chose, Dyknow, allows teachers to pop up instant votes, instant quick little quizzes, and those kinds of things on the student screens that just happen out of nowhere as if by magic. And so you really gain that instructional time back, and it encourages teachers to really use those assessment features when they're not having to wait around and waste valuable class time trying to get to another polling solution. And then finally, from the teacher side, it's nice to be able to mass open web pages. All right, kids, we're going to www.abcd.com/capital P lowercase n. And I mean, we all know what these feel like, trying to get a group of students to go to a website. So instead of making the short links, instead of whatever were happening on the fly, I can push out all of those. I can push out that website to all my students' computers. It opens on all of them, and then we're instantly on the site, once again, gaining those class time back. So from the instructional side, it really is about getting your class time back. Now, from the technology side, sure, we care about instruction, but we also care about the infrastructure. And so there's two big things it does. It empowers the teachers, and so they're able to do things that the technology staff used to have to take care of, and it lessens your load. So the first thing it does is allow teacher independence. Teachers aren't having to come to you to say, hey, will you block these websites? Because they can block that on demand. Before we implemented Dyknow in those first few months, we were getting constant feedback of, hey, this website needs to be blocked, or this is a time waster, and we need to block these websites. And sometimes they were in conflict. One teacher was wanting to use a website that another teacher didn't want to use. This gave all that power back to the teachers. They could handle it themselves without the IT department. They were able to choose what websites a student could go to in an instant in their class. It can also help to alleviate concerns of a one-to-one rollout. So one of the biggest concerns is, what if I give all these laptops out to people and teachers don't use them, or students, more importantly, don't use them? And the classroom management software really helps with that and scaffolds that up for teachers where they feel more comfortable with it. All the classroom management software I've looked at are cloud-based, so there's not hardware to install or a server to install and run and operate, so it's completely in the cloud. It was very minimal setup. And then you can, on some of them, get device and web analytics, so what's being used. And then some of the classroom management software can actually be web filtering, so they can be your primary web filter instead of just the secondary.
That's great. Really good run through from both perspectives, if you're on the instruction side or the tech side. And yes, you care about both, but in terms of getting the most out of your investment and to make sure the students are learning while they're using these devices, these are a lot of good value points that if you don't currently have a classroom management software at your school, or if there's some buy-in trouble to maybe, we do use Dyknow or we use another solution, but we're having trouble with people using it because they don't realize the benefits. This is a really good list to share with those two personas of people to see, look, it can help you with this and it can help you with that. So we're going to go to the next slide here. Tooling such as a classroom management software or any type of software you implement immediately starts to lose value if it's not implemented correctly. And then people don't use it. So you guys have good high usage at Cleveland City Schools. And so just out of curiosity, what were the steps you took at your district to successfully implement classroom management software as listed on this slide?
Yeah, so it really went back down to being very purposeful. So one of the big things we talked about is, how is rosterization going to happen? How are we going to get students into classes so that teachers can manage them? Dyknow, for instance, happens to automatically rosterize via PowerSchool for us. And when we rolled it out, I had really bad luck with some different rosterization processes. And you know, when you talk to technology vendors, every technology vendor always says, oh yeah, we sync with insert technology edtech tool. But the different levels of that sync can be a little misleading sometimes. And so when we originally rolled out Dyknow, I was kind of like, well, I really don't want to have the issues of people constantly being on the wrong class. Let's just let teachers rosterize themselves. And then we ultimately decided, well, let's go ahead and try it out and see how it goes. And once we're seeing that, then we can fall back to manual rosterization. So I'm happy that we did, because the rosterization with Dyknow was seamless. And so for us, students just appear in the classes as soon as it had, well, I think overnight. So by the next day, once someone's enrolled into PowerSchool. And so that gives time back to the teachers. They're not having to figure out what students in this class, which students I need to take out. The students are just there, and so they get to click that manage button and constantly have control. But that's one of the big things we had to think about, is how are teachers going to manage these lists. We also had to think about, okay, how is this going to interfere with, or how is it going to harmonize with our content filter? We use Securely as our content filter, and ultimately we didn't have any issues. We did have to think about any overlaps, and then what needs to be whitelisted to make sure that we're not having any issues with Dyknow. How do you prevent students from bypassing software? Kids are very clever, and so if certain websites are up before the classroom management software is launched, they're still available. One kid figured out that if they log out of the Chromebook, they log back in, and before Dyknow gets going, they close out of the internet, launch it back, launch the web page, close out of the internet, launch it back, then they're on that website without Dyknow realizing it. So there's a whole bunch of these little things that teachers had to become familiar with of, oh, I understand how this happens. And they're not big deals, but it still took a significant amount of training on the teachers to make them aware of here's how it needs to be implemented and implemented well. Another thought was, when should teachers be able to actually see students? If students are at home, like they're on a sick day, or for whatever reason a teacher were to try at 5 o'clock at night, do we want teachers to be able to see what the students are doing, or more specifically even their screen? And we ultimately decided no, because if that happens, then it could put some liability on us, the teachers or whoever. And so we have it set up where only the teachers can only view students at school while they're in the building. And that was how our district decided to handle that. And then a big one was, who's going to be in charge of troubleshooting issues? So if there is an issue, which are very minimal because it's all cloud infrastructure, then how are we going to handle that? Who's it going to go to? And so there were all these things from the infrastructure side that we had to think about. And then from the instructional side, we had to think, okay, how are we going to have time to train the technology staff? How are we going to have time to train our administrators? They have to understand what we are and aren't able to do with this. If they're getting the parent phone calls, y'all are just spying on my kids. Well, no, here's the reality of what's happening. Who's going to deliver the initial training? So how are we going to get teachers bought in, and how are we going to get them to actually using it? Because we've all been there. We've bought tools that never actually get implemented. And so that can be a tragedy. But if you're doing classroom management software, and the whole point of it is to be able to roll out one-to-one, and you don't have anybody buying into classroom management software, and therefore they're not buying into the one-to-one rollout, then you have a bigger issue. So getting training on the classroom management software is a real key to making teachers feel comfortable with it and then want to use it. But the initial training is not it either. Who's going to provide the ongoing support and professional development for teachers? Now, at our schools, we have an instructional technology facilitator in both of our secondary schools. And so they would provide the support, but not all schools have that, or they structure differently. So who provides the ongoing professional development that teachers need? Research shows that if you don't have ongoing job-embedded professional development, technology adoption tends to fail. And then with that, who are we going to report issues to? That's kind of balancing the instructional side with the technology side of, okay, we report internet issues to these people, we report these to other issues to this other person. So who does Dyknow issues go to? Does it go to the instructional technology facilitator, or does it go to IT, and figuring all of that out? And then what specific training do our administrators need? They need to know how to contact those parents, which I addressed earlier. And then finally, one of the biggest things that has to happen in training is ensuring that teachers know how to start and end a class. If you start the class, you're monitoring them. So make sure you end it so when they go to the next teacher, then you don't have the issue of teachers not being able to have students go to the websites they want. Now, most classroom management software has a solution where the teacher can go in and actually take control of the student. And that works very well in 99% of the cases, especially in a good rollout. But sometimes it can be an issue, and the best practice is to make sure that teachers always stop monitoring a class if they start it.
Cody, this is extremely helpful and valuable. I'm very tempted to give this slide to our service team here in the office and say, share this with all our customers, because for those of you who are listening in, whether you have not started an implementation, you don't even have a software yet, or you have classroom management software and you're looking to improve it or increase usage, these are really, really good and valuable points to go back to and ask all these questions for these two departments to see where you can improve, and know that, as Cody said, especially with that PD point, it's an ongoing monitoring of how can we improve here, where are we lacking here, are people still using this tool, and these are great checkpoints for that. So we're going to go to the next slide. Questions. I don't know if we've received any. If anyone wants to ask a question, we'll give it like a few seconds, 30 seconds or so. If not comfortable asking a question now, or one comes up after, you are more than welcome to email me after this webinar. If it's one that's directed for Cody, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. You can still email them to me, and I can email Cody. We can figure that out post-webinar, but a lot of this is really solid information. So any detailed questions probably directed at Cody on what they did in more detail, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer. So
yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, not seeing any come in. That's okay. Means you did a thorough job.
Oh, here's
one blinking. Okay. How do you get the teachers to utilize this tool when they feel like their classroom management is working?
You know, I haven't had a problem with that. Even the teachers who really are good at classroom management tend to use it for those times when you can't see every screen, or if we're really good teachers and we're conferencing one-on-one with students, and sometimes our back are to kids. And so this is that time when you can't have 100% eyes on every student and those kind of situations. So I mean, if they have the best classroom management in the world, like they should be on TV teaching people how to do it, then they may not need it. But I just hadn't ran into that issue personally, because most teachers, my wife is probably the best teacher that I know, and she uses Dyknow pretty consistently, just so it's there in case she's conferencing with a student or something like that, just so kids aren't trying to do those off-task behaviors.
Yeah, and I'll respond a little bit to that question. I'm obviously not in schools, but I think there's kind of a naiveness with that whenever you think like, oh, everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing and it's going to be fine. So realizing that even if you run Dyknow, we typically tell people to run it and then let the analytics run, because you will be very surprised on what they're looking at, who is looking at what. Maybe the student you thought that is, you know, the perfect student is the one that's off task a lot, and maybe they need to be challenged more because they're bored, so they're going off task on their laptop. And so a lot of insights can be found through like monitoring classroom management software with that to assist you in the classroom, even if you think it's something you may not need. I think it's worth trying. So
I think, yeah, that's a good point. Is something she did mention, and something I really didn't touch on that much. You do have the ability to go back and see what students did retrospectively. And so if nothing else, yeah, try to get your teachers just to turn it on, see what happens throughout a couple of their classes, and go back and look at the data.
Yep. Okay, Karen, do you roster with Aspen? Great question. The three we roster with are Power School, Infinite Campus, and Skyward. But if Aspen, I might get the tech term wrong here, integrates with one roster, and I can look up this information, then we should be able to integrate it. So if anything connects with one roster, we're able to plug it in just like we do with the others. And I can get you that technical information after. And then Terrence, I believe this is for you, Cody. What is the student population of the schools you've implemented Dyknow in? And has the implementation affected your network bandwidth at all?
So the technical side, we have a gig up and a gig down, and then fiber between all the schools. So Dyknow's 612 at our schools. That's 2 different schools. The middle school has 1,500 students. The high school has about 1,800 students. And I mean, obviously it's affected network bandwidth, but it's not been in any noticeable way. So if you look at how Dyknow works specifically, by default, what you're getting is a live view of every website a student's on. And so that's using hardly any data. It's just reporting, here's what websites they're on. Now, the teacher can go through and choose to actually see student screens. And the way they handle that is by sending snapshots every 15 seconds. I think it's 15 by default. And you can always refresh or request them more frequently. What I really find out is most of the time, the teachers don't use the screenshots very much because they can see what's happening via the live feed on the right-hand corner of what websites kids are on. Now, if you're on a Windows device or something like that, you can be more specific. So the teacher could say, okay, we're only allowed in this program, or we're only allowed on this web browser, and then you can see what they're on as well. And so we haven't noticed any impact, though obviously there's been some, but it's not been anything over and above what we'd normally see.
Yeah, that's, I can confidently say, and our service team would agree, we've never ever had a customer go, you guys broke our Wi-Fi, or we can't use Dyknow because this hurts our Wi-Fi. And that is due to how it's built, because we do not live broadcast, which does bog down Wi-Fi. Because we're cloud-based and we don't have a server there in the way that server relationship is built. And then last question from Brad, how about Google Classroom rostering? So my understanding, and again, I can get more details too after the webinar, is we prefer to use student information systems because with Google Classroom rostering, what we found, and actually some of our competitors do this, is students can unenroll themselves. And whenever students figure out that they are being monitored by Dyknow or whatever other solution is out there, and they can't play their game or can't do what they want to do, they typically don't want to be monitored. And so, like Cody said earlier, you have kids get super crafty and they try to see how they can get around it. And that's a very easy way for them to get around it. I can, if you guys don't have a SIS, I can reach back out to you after this webinar and see, like, okay, what's a solution we could do to work with you on the Google Classroom rostering there. But from what I know, we prefer the SIS because the students can't get out of it. Perfect. Great questions, some technical and some about implementation. So this is going to bring me to the call out. For those of you who are not Dyknow customers, we would love for you to try it. We're offering a free trial. All you have to do is go to this link. Super easy to set up. 3 steps. You whitelist it on your content filter. You sync up with your student information system, and then you install it on student devices only. And with a meeting with one of our team members for about 15 minutes, they can get it going, and you can try it in your classroom, maybe run those analytics to see what those kids are doing. So we invite all of you to try that with us today.
If I can throw in here, I don't work for Dyknow. I'm not being paid by Dyknow, but I would give them a shout out. We tried some other classroom management options and weren't happy with them. And we ultimately, after trying several, did land with Dyknow. And it was really easy to try it out and make sure it worked for us before we purchased.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. And he's telling the truth. We're not paying him. He's being very nice today for joining this webinar. So thank you for that feedback. But yeah, I think that is the end. This, again, will be recorded, or it is recorded, and it's going to be sent out to all early next week once we get the video up and the blog post up. And again, please feel free to share this with internal resources or with those that you know in your school have the power to maybe push a classroom management software. Hey, here's why we need it. Our teachers need it. This is why we should get it from the instruction and tech perspective. So Cody, thanks again so much for taking the time to present again on this topic. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You all too.